Good evening and welcome to another edition of Conversations about Jazz and Other Distractions. Boy, do we have a great show for you this evening. We have three powerhouse producers who are instrumental in shaping the presentation of art and music for a new generation. But before I introduce my guests, there's always some housekeeping that we must do. First of all, I want to thank you, the audience, for following, joining, and supporting these live conversations and these organizations. Your support is greatly appreciated, and I would like to take this opportunity also to thank our many sponsors: the Fulton County Arts Council, the City of Atlanta Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, AT&T Time Warner Media, the Community Foundation of Greater Atlanta, and NPN, the National Performance Network, for their continued support of the Hammonds House Museum, helping to make this program possible. As I said earlier, we really have a great show for you tonight. My first guest is the Executive Director of the DC Festival. Please welcome Sunny Sumter.
Hello, it's wonderful to be here.
It's
Thank
great
you,
to have
Carl.
you.
It's lovely to be here.
My second guest is the senior producer of the Apollo Theater. Please welcome Laura Greer. Hello, Laura.
Hey, Carl. Hey, Sunny.
Hi, Laura.
And finally, my last guest for this evening is the executive director of the Hammonds House Museum, Leatrice Ellzy.
Hey.
Hey, Leatrice, how you doing, ladies?
I am fantastic. We're good. I'm good.
You're
Very
looking
good.
great, and I am so honored to have you here with me tonight. I want to start out, though, as we always do. You know, since March, when the pandemic came full-blown and shut down life as we know it, it brought the entire arts community to a screeching halt. What were your initial thoughts about the survival of your individual organizations, and how have you navigated this disruption? And let's start with you, Leatrice.
Well, it was a daunting time. You know, I mean, that is just truth. We didn't know, what we were going to do. We had dollars that were going to be coming in that we were anticipating, but we didn't really know how long those dollars would last. Can we be open? I mean, there were so many questions. You know, when you look at a budget, the budget is not only for money that comes in through funding, but it's also, the money that you generate within the institution. So with our doors closed, that meant that we were not generating any revenue. So there were a lot of things to be concerned about and worried about. But I will say that on the other side of that we are actually in a pretty stable space today. On what is today, December 10th, we are in a stable, in a pretty stable space. We're in a very different space than we were in March. I was very concerned in March. So, but we've been able to maintain our staff. We didn't have to furlough anyone. We did have to cut back hours and that type of thing. But in terms of, furloughing, we did not have to do that. And I'm extremely grateful that we didn't do that. And so all of those people that you mentioned on the top of the show were really a great support in that, as well as our members and donors. And so we are extremely grateful for all those people that really supported the Hammonds House during that period of time, and who I hope will continue to support us, because we're not out of the woods yet. We still cannot open our doors, even though others are open, because, we're in a 150-year-old house. Mm-hmm. And so ventilation is not the same as it is in some modern buildings. And then also we are in the middle of a Black community, and we service a Black community. And so we think about our responsibility, especially with Black people being the most hit by this pandemic. And so, there's a lot that goes along. It has gone on in our thinking about whether or not we open the doors, how we open our doors. So we have done things for small groups, and people that wanted to record in the Hammonds House. That has happened. But again, small groups, 10 people or less, that type of thing.
Sunny, you do a once-a-year jazz festival. How has this whole thing impacted you?
Well, we do a jazz festival, but we also do year-round programs with DC Public. Mm-hmm. So it's impacted us tremendously, Carl. We were 2 months away from presenting what we thought was going to be our best festival yet, our 16th edition. The year prior, we had 80,000 people just on one day, over 148,000 people. So we were gearing up for a huge outdoor experience, festival experience. So we signed a number of contracts. And when we heard about the pandemic, we heard early, we started to realize that something was going to shift. We weren't sure. Obviously, none of us were sure. We made the call pretty early at the end of March. We canceled the festival. We decided to postpone it to the fall. And we decided to just think about how we were going to support our artists, because we knew right away that everything had closed down. Our artists were the ones that were going to be impacted the most. So we went right into a mode of fundraising. We had a Live from Our Living Room DC event. It started in New York, Live from Our Living Room New York. They brought it here. We were able to raise money to give grants to 22 artists here in DC. We also started to play some of our archival footage and then write checks to those artists. And we didn't have to furlough, like Leatrice, we didn't have to furlough anyone. And in fact, we did not even have to reduce hours because our team is very small. We have a very mighty team, a small team. But one of the things we didn't do is we couldn't bring on any of our contractors, our consultants that we've had a long-standing relationship with, and they're actually used to that income in, second quarter of the year, every year for Jazz Fest. So big sacrifices that we had to make to stay alive. And we're thankful to the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, who gave us some working capital money that we got matched. So for the first time in our 16 years, we had a working capital reserve, and we didn't even have to touch it. But I think just knowing that it was there really helped us tremendously. And then like you both said, here in DC, we've got the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities and a number of other great organizations now. And my board, board members stepped up. And not only did they pay their dues, but some paid more. So, we're in a good place right now as a result. And we put on a tremendous virtual festival in September that over 200,000 people actually came from around the globe. And we were number 3 on Pollstar. First time we ever hit Pollstar. So it was really a good thing for us. And, all in all, this has been a trying year, but we've had some real milestones as well.
Great. Laura, the Apollo is a Harlem landmark.
Yes, it is.
And
I wish I could say that we did not have to furlough or, in fact, lay some people off. We actually did. We're a fairly large institution. And I think I have to say, we were cautious about our programs, but there was a part of us being here in New York, we were incredibly optimistic that come April, we're going to do the shows. Come May, we're going to do these shows. And we kept inching to these different deadlines or timeframes, and we realized, no, we're not able to do these different programs. So we ended up obviously having to postpone as well as cancel. And we were more or less, I would say, following the lead of New York City Broadway, what was happening on Broadway and how that was starting to roll out here in New York. And we've been fairly consistent around that, just checking what's happening in terms of the Broadway situation, in terms of audiences returning to theaters. But we did unfortunately have to furlough people 50% time. We had a few folks that we unfortunately did have to lay off. And we do have, as a theater, much like what Sunny said, there are folks that work with us like hourly. So whether it's our ushers or security team, box office staff. So, I think those are the people that we are most, continue to be most concerned about, because quite frankly, we're not in a position to keep everybody fully employed. And we're still at that place where obviously we're not able to do that. Much like what Sunny said, I think we were pleasantly surprised, and I shouldn't say pleasantly, but we did have a board member that stepped up with a fairly significant contribution to the institution of $1 million. And that was around, I think it was around June or so. And that really helped us to give us, some, I don't want to say some breathing space to kind of get through the rest of the year. And then we finally, I want to say finally, but in some ways we tried to quickly pivot, which the Apollo doesn't do anything quick, to digital. And so we did put together a digital strategy to keep present, just to keep, in the game, as they say. And we've been doing some amazing digital programs for free. So we do have the resources and the funding for that. We also got another Ford Foundation grant. So we've, interestingly enough, I feel like we're still, keeping it together and healthy as an institution. However, I think the one thing that still pulls on my heartstrings is Amateur Night. And Amateur Night has had, what is it, 85-year history. And this is probably one of the longest times that Amateur Night has not been presented in that time, in that 85 years. And obviously there's a core of our musicians and other talent connected to the show that happened weekly. And so that's been very difficult. But we have survived 85 plus years, and God willing, we will continue.
Oh, the Apollo's not going anywhere. That's the landmark. I mean, I remember when Percy Sutton purchased it to bring it back.
Absolutely, yeah.
But what really concerns me was reading the New York Times, or I think a CNN article about the surge in virus cases after the Thanksgiving holiday. The first 5 days of December was almost 1 million people had contracted, just from travel. And we haven't even gotten to Christmas and New Year's yet, so have your institutions thought about how that's going to impact the forecast for next year of, possibly opening in the fall if we're going to, get these continued surges because people don't want to stay home?
So
go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to jump in. So I think with the Apollo, we are, obviously we are making a plan to come back on some level for the fall. Now we have to align our wishes, if you will, with the state, and there's some very specific guidelines that we would be following in terms of capacity levels, as well as COVID protocols that we would have to follow. And indeed, one thing I didn't mention before was that, interestingly enough, we actually have had some revenue coming in from rentals. There have been a number of companies and artists that have actually come into the Apollo to rent the theater and do performances without an audience, but they've been recording them. So I think one of the things is for us is constant, monitoring of what's happening between now and next fall. We are also moving into a new theater. We have another adjacent theater that we're opening. So all of this is just based on what's happening and monitoring it very closely so that we can be mindful and protective of our staff, and then of course of the audiences that we hope to have come the fall. But quite frankly, we none of us really know what's going to happen. Right. Certainly with this vaccine, we don't know.
In DC, we are erring on the side of caution. I'm on a couple of task forces here in DC, and we're in constant contact with the mayor's office. And we understand clearly that that we have a holding pattern right now. They just went into retract the reopening process because of the uptick since Thanksgiving. One of the things I would love to see happen is I'd love to have small businesses continue to stay open, and for us as adults to just practice social distancing and to wear a mask and do the things that we need to do. But small business is really the lifeline, I think, of the DC community, DC, Maryland, Virginia community, and to just see the back and forth with them closing, not closing. And, so many of our venues in this area have closed completely. Twins Jazz is a big institution, gone, closed. And so, of our 42 venues that we work with every year, 6 of them have closed. That's a big number. And so we are concerned as a presenting organization that partners citywide. We're concerned about what the festival is going to look like in September. And like you, Laura, we are thinking about having another festival, but also with the year-round programming that we're doing, where we're getting, everybody ready for the big festival. We don't know what that looks like right now. And we just got my board just approved a budget that's 30% of what it was pre-COVID. And we've got to live, within our means. And, how we do that successfully, we're going to have to really stretch and think about, how we work with a lot of our pro bono partners or a lot of our in-kind partners to continue to make art, to make music.
And with the Hammond's House, we are planning a lot to continue our digital programming. So we've been doing a lot of digital programming since March. Really, April's when we rolled out. Our first show was April 15th. But also we are planning some exhibitions. And so we are planning exhibitions for the new year, probably not rolling out until March. So the dates are up in the air, but if they have to be digital, they'll be digital. We're hoping that we can do some type of small group, come in, in groups of 8 to 10 or what have you. But we're still kind of working through that. And so we're waiting to see how, just kind of how the pandemic, the vaccine, like how is all that going to play out? And then we can continue making decisions based on that. But we plan to continue with the robust schedule. So because I would say that our schedule is pretty robust, even with us not, even your producer, Ravi, will say robust because Ravi has been working robustly because we've been busy, So, think about we do your show twice a month. We've been doing, other programming, just like this or a series of other programs. So, we'll continue a robust schedule.
Now, I started out as a production assistant running tickets, posters, and money to record stores back in the day. Here's my 70s moment, Lee.
1970s, go ahead.
For concerts and boat rides in DC. That's how I started, my whole music industry thing, learning the ropes before I joined the promotion company and began producing concerts. And then, it was OJT for the most part. Describe your journeys to becoming producers, ladies, and any one of you can start. Sonny, you start. I've met you. You were singing.
Okay, so yes,
you were a vocalist.
I was a vocalist. Really for over 15 years, traveling around the world as a jazz vocalist. Graduated from
and
Howard
you were very
University.
good. You were very good, by the way. I have your first album.
Thank you. I had a lot of, just adored that time in my life. What a great chapter. And then I became a mom, and my then husband at the time owned a number of bookstores here in the DC area, Caribou Books. So I really took a backseat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I took a backseat from performing and wanted to be mom. And so I did that. And then as time went on, I went back to singing a little bit, but the manager of Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Fishman, started the Duke Ellington Jazz Festival here in DC. Mm-hmm. And I was working at the Aspen Institute at the time, and Charlie said, "Hey, I need you to come and help me build partnerships, because that's what I do, bring people together." So started on a consulting basis working with him. One thing led to another. I became managing director and then executive director. I had no idea that I would be running a jazz festival, let alone running an organization, a nonprofit organization that does, over 70 programs a year. But I think it's the best job that I've ever had next to being mom. And I think the idea of creating a cultural destination, which is what the Jazz Festival has become here in DC, has been so rewarding. And I never thought I'd be on the business side and bringing so many of my great friends to DC from all genres of the jazz. Jazz is so huge and what it can bring. So, some of my dearest friends have come to DC, and I've got a chance to spend some quality time with them and present them on big stages here because we do really big art. So, you know, yes, I was once a jazz singer, but I have to say that, you know, being on this side of it has been tremendously rewarding, and I'm really fortunate. I'm pinching myself. I'm very fortunate to have the job that I have.
Cool. Laura?
Ooh, that's a long journey, Carl.
Well, give us the abridged version.
I wish I could be as succinct as Sunny. So I've been working in the field of arts because really I have seen myself as an arts administrator for so many years, and that's how I started out of college. And I actually grew up in Boston, and one of my things as a young person was I had to live in New York City. So I went to college, and then I came to New York City right out of college and jumped right into the art scene here in New York. And part of that had to do with just having a lot of friends who were artists and who were theater artists, in fact. So I didn't start out in music at all and doing and producing jazz concerts at all. It was really, I was the person that was, of my friends, I was organized. I never wanted to be on stage. I was a stage manager, production assistant, you know, got the show up and running. And early on, I started working with a friend of mine and did some shows at La Mama, and La Mama ETC, which was a theater. It still is. It's in the East Village. And I was so impressed that it was run and founded by a Black woman, Ellen Stewart. And I think that gave me a certain kind of point of view about working with artists, and helped to set me on my journey from doing production assistant, stage management, working at different types of arts organizations. And then I landed at Aaron Davis Hall, which was a performing arts center on the campus of City College. And I actually came there to do one thing, but ended up doing something else. And I stayed there for 13 years. And part of that was focused on programming. And actually, as someone who was interested and curious in a number of different arts disciplines, I was kind of the person, you know, doing the presenting and creating opportunities for artists, and in particular artists of color. And that was what we set out to do there, and build out a programming department, build out education programs, all under the banner of the, how do we work with artists to really, very altruistic in making our world better. And that experience, I was really fortunate to meet, so many different artists. But being the presenter, being the person dealing with budgets, the production people, et cetera, that's kind of what I love to do, is take a vision and find a way to execute it. Take a vision, work a budget, and do it. So after my time at Aaron Davis Hall, I had another stint with another organization here in New York called 651 Arts. And there I was actually able to find an opportunity to travel and to do a lot of work with different African artists. We had a project there called Africa Exchange. And so I was able to do interesting projects with a variety of different artists. And then I had the good fortune of, within that, all those years, being connected to a number of different women producers, Stephanie Hewley being one of them. And Stephanie, and I'll never forget this, we were at a Ford Foundation meeting at the Ford Foundation, and she said, I'm going back to Atlanta to run the National Black Arts Festival. Does anyone want to come with me? And I was like, yes, I do. So that was like a dream. That was a dream job. It was, and so I came to Atlanta, went down to Atlanta for 6 years, and worked with the festival when it kind of came out of a very dark period. And we did I guess I was there from 2000 to 2006. I was there for 6 years as the associate producer. And basically I was the person dealing with the budget, dealing with the production team, dealing with the travel of artists in and out, all of that part, as well as doing some of the curating as well, and working with people like Leatrice. And then I wanted to come back to New York. And one of my, a boss that I had early in my career was actually at the Apollo. And I said to him, I'm kind of thinking about coming back to New York. And interestingly enough, it was just at the moment when the Apollo was starting to really focus on embracing its nonprofit status and really looking at programming and how it programs as a performing arts center as opposed to just an entertainment venue. And so I was hired to come in and help to build out the programming department and the education program and the archives and whatever else we do at the Apollo. And I've been at the Apollo for 15 years now. So that's been my journey. I think the thing that I am most proud of is that over all those years, I've worked with Black institutions and worked with artists of color, Black artists, and really trying to make a space. And also, as I learned from Ellen Stewart, how to say yes, because so often we don't have, there's so many gatekeepers.
Right.
And Black artists don't always have an opportunity to actually realize their dreams. And so I think that's what I've been trying to do as a producer.
And you've done a great job of that, Laura.
Well, thank you, Ms. Leatrice.
No, she absolutely has. And so I look, after Laura, you don't even need me to talk. After Laura's 30, how many years? 30 years, Laura?
Well, I started when I was super young. Actually, I added it up. Young. It literally has been almost 40 years.
Okay.
Congrats.
I was really, really, really young.
Yeah. So, my story, I would say that I've always been producing, like always. My mom will say that when I was like really, really young, and I know from high school, I was always the one that produced all of the shows, like, hey, let's get together and we're going to do this. Hey, we're going to do this. I've got a pianist. They're going to come in and do this. And pull together a group of people, not only to engage and participate, but also a group of people to an audience. So always pulling all those pieces together, just as part of who I am. So who knew that there was a name for it? Didn't know that there was a name for it. Would never have been able to articulate that as vision. So, I came up producing television. I produced radio, all of those things before I got to the actual arts and producing on a stage. So I started out my arts career at the Woodruff Arts Center here in Atlanta with a program that was focused on celebrating Black art and culture, which was really, really exciting. And then that was right around the time, it intersected with the time that Stephanie and Laura came down to Atlanta to take over the National Black Arts Festival. And so that first year, their first festival, I was at the Woodruff Arts Center. And we were talking and we did some things together because I was at Woodruff with some space and a budget, and they were at at National Black Arts Festival needing some space and a budget. And so we were able to collaborate on a number of programs that year. And Stephanie Hewley kept saying, you need to come to the National Black Arts Festival. You need to leave here and come to the National Black Arts Festival. I said, no, you need me here so that when you need space and a budget, I'm here. But soon that next festival, Laura called me and asked me to come over to the festival to help with a project. And that was the beginning of my career with the National Black Arts Festival. So Laura and I actually worked together for a number of years before she went back to New York. Mm-hmm. And so when she went back to New York, she passed the baton to me and she said, and I was in New York, and Laura said, you need to go to the festival. And I always say that Laura Greer has always given me the best career advice throughout my life. That I listen to or don't listen to, but I always listen. And Laura said, you need to go back to Atlanta because there's a lot that you need to learn. You get to see, you get to experience and engage the festival, but who we are as an organization, who the National Black Arts Festival is as an organization, and our who we are in the world, you need to be able to experience that, learn from that, in order to build this career that you say that you want. And being in New York is not going to help you do that. And so I went back to Atlanta, and Stephanie Hewley said, she's like, you can go back to New York and do whatever you want to do. You need to come to the festival. The festival's going to give you a life, and come down here. So she and Laura, really kind of planted those seeds. And I came back to National Black Arts Festival and got me a life. And the festival really, I would not be who I am without that experience working and producing and curating and traveling the world with the National Black Arts Festival, working with some of the most amazing artists, the most brilliant minds, and all of that rubs off on you. It inspires you, and then it also confirms for you why you do this work and why you wanted to do this work. Laura talked about giving Black artists a voice, and she's absolutely right. There's so many gatekeepers for us in so many places. And so for organizations like National Black Arts Festival, like the Hammons House Museum, like the Apollo, et cetera, that, you know, we really do, we don't see you as Black first, you know, and then have to see you as Black and then have to parse whether or not what you are providing is valuable. We see you as an artist telling a story about Black life, and it's always valuable, right? So that's a very big difference between, you know, going to white institutions and and working with Black people at Black institutions. And so I think for artists, it's a different experience. For audiences, it's a different experience. And then for those of us who are producers, it's a very, very different experience. So, so anyway, I went to National Black Arts Festival, stayed there. I was there for the next 6 years. So Laura preceded me 6 years. I was there for the next 6 years. And then I left, kind of struck out on my own and did some really cool things out of my own before the Hammons House hit me up and said, hey, we're going through a transition, you know, come in and just help us reimagine for the 21st century. And so for the past almost 4 years, I've been at Hammons House Museum, reimagining the organization for the 21st century. So it has been, it's been great because, you know, one thing about National Black Arts Festival is that you become a master or masterful in all disciplines, you know, so music might be the thing that you feel as though is your core discipline. However, you learn music, dance, theater, film, visual arts, literature, you touch in humanities, you know, so you really do it all through the support and the help of curators and, you know, experts in those fields, but you have to come to it with a level of knowledge. And so my reading, what I listen to, what I watch, what I take in, you know, musically or, you know, from a literature standpoint, all of it, you know, really, really has made a difference. And so coming into the Hammons House, it helped me dig a little bit more into the visual side, you know, which has been amazing. And then, so yeah, so that's kind of how I have gotten it. I mean, how I got into it, how I started, but the Woodruff Art Center was my first foray in the arts field. But like Laura, I've been very fortunate in that Black art and culture has been my focus. You know, so even at the Woodruff Art Center in this, you know, predominantly white institution, I was doing the Black stuff, you know, and bringing Black artists into the space that Black artists had never felt welcome. And so when we look at the festival, I mean, we look at Woodruff Art Center now, all these years later, so 20 years later, and see so many Black faces, not only on stages, but also in administration, you know, in programming sides. That first program, that first Spirit and Splendor project that we did was the thing that really catapulted it. The success of that forced them into diversity.
You know, it's
so
interesting it's interesting to hear your stories because there's so much education in what you do. You know, each one of you do. You know, because when I was producing concerts, it was get the baddest band of the day, put them on a stage, sell some tickets, take home some money, call it a day. You know, really wasn't worried about audience satisfaction, any kind of education, you know, anything like that. But it seems like the three of you actually look at the artists that can bring the most to the table for your audiences, as opposed to what I did was just, you know, throw a band on stage, put an opening act, and, you know, at the end of the day, don't get drunk and drive home, you know, kind of thing.
Well, Carl, I mean, but sometimes, you know, sometimes you certainly are going to put like really popular artists on the stage because you want to draw audiences, you want to make the money, but there is a difference between the commercial model and this cultural arts model. So there definitely is a difference, but no, we certainly want to, you know, whoever the baddest band is, it's like, oh, they're the baddest band right now. Let's go ahead and get them because you want to draw that audience in, but you're also going to have them do a master class for people to understand what their process is, how they came to it, you know, and you may do that talk back or whatever, because you do want audiences to walk away with something a little bit more, meaningful. What did this music mean? How did they create it? What were they thinking about? All of those kinds of things, because there's a humanities component to it as well.
And here in DC, I mean, we were charged with having a mostly free festival. And so we weren't concerned about earned income at all. We got a lot of contributed income from the city. But once Mayor Gray came in and got rid of earmarks, all of a sudden we had to think about butts and seats. And for the Jazz Festival, we never considered a high level artist, because up the road was the Capitol Jazz Fest, and they brought, really big talent there. And so, we didn't focus so much on that. We wanted to bring serious jazz artists, jazz artists that were diversified with instruments and even gender. We made sure we included a lot of women, jazz artists from Young Lions on up to our elders, and just really did a fantastic job of programming the art. But I think just in the last 5 years, we've had to look at butts and seats. So we brought the Roots, we brought Snarky Puppy. Last year we had Michael Franks, which attributed, to that 80,000 that we had.
Michael's amazing.
He's fantastic. But on the other hand, we had Terry Lynn Carrington and Sean Jones. And, one year we had Layla Hathaway, who was absolutely outstanding. But then we bring, Kenny Barron and Ron Carter. So really for us, it really is this, we want to paint this broad brush around what jazz is. And we want people to, we always say there's something for everyone. It doesn't matter what kind of jazz you like. Come to the party, because there's going to be something and you'll learn something new too. You'll learn and discover a new artist as well.
And I think I would say, particularly in jazz, you have to kind of mix it up a little bit. Even at the Apollo, some of the, the last, I think was the last project that we worked on was with Christian McBride, doing actually he did his dream project. It was around James Brown. He wanted to do something around James Brown, which he mentioned to me years ago. And it came up on the 50th anniversary of the song "Say It Loud." I'm Black and I'm Proud. And so I called them and I said, Christian, I think this is the moment. And he put together this amazing concert that included not only, obviously, Christian creating his band. And as most people, I don't know if people know that James's music, I mean, he came out of a jazz scene too. And so Christian then, popped in all these different artists, from Avery Sunshine to Nona Hendricks to Lisa Fisher to, I'm blanking on the other artists, but it was that mix. And sometimes as we producers and programming, we have to be able to, if we have to get butts and seats, we have to look at programming as a way of a balance. So it's not that we are, I say, giving up our, not necessarily, we want to have a balance of artists that can sell tickets, but also give people an experience that they may not have experienced before. I think that's what we're always looking for at the Apollo. And it's interesting, being at the Apollo was a very different ride than being at some place like a National Black Arts Festival. I mean, when the culture is very specific for a National Black Arts Festival, whereas the Apollo, people are coming to their expectation and their history has been about what is the hottest new band that is on the chart that we can see, and that was the history for so many years. Now, interestingly enough, with the Apollo, in its early years, the popular music of the time was jazz. So from the 30s to the 50s, and into some of part of the 60s, the core of the musicians were jazz musicians that we now know as, very famous artists. So it's always been this kind of interesting, at least this mix, because the other thing about the Apollo in its history, it also had, for example, like a Hugh Masekela, a Celia Cruz. So again, it was all of these very popular artists, international artists that were also part of the history of the institution.
Yeah, and I'll have to say that, probably the festival where we did so much amazing jazz music, but it was, and you know what, Carl, I was like, you popped out And I was listening to Laura talk. I think I
Mhm.
forgot what the question was.
Oh,
No,
we were
actually, I
talking-
know I forgot what the question was. Because I was like so engaged in
And
what
I-
Laura and Sunny were
Right,
saying.
and I
Right.
think I was kind of riffing off of something Sunny said or something you said. And did we answer the question, Carl?
Right.
You
That's what we
did.
do as
You did.
producers. That's
Let's
what we
go to
do
the
as
next
producers.
I think,
question.
You know, we were talking about the difference between, you know, my situation where it was just
Oh, right,
commercially
right.
and financially concerned. You know, we really weren't concerned about audience satisfaction because we figured if they were looking at the best band, they'd walk away happy. You
Right,
know, and
right.
if we sold out, they definitely, you know, as long as the band didn't mess up, you know, but that as nonprofit organizations, you're bringing, like Leatrice mentioned earlier, a more aspect of humanities and education to the process that I never even dealt with because it was, you know, get you in, get you out, go home,
And
you know.
and yeah, and thank you, because that's what I wanted to respond to, which I did say earlier. And the other thing that I think that we think about, I know that I think about it, is, you know, how are we ensuring like this next generation, and not even just the next generation, how are we ensuring the continuation of Black art and culture, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, it's about when you get them, we are, you know, you constantly are saying to people that this is why this is valuable. You know, this is valuable. This is why this artist is a gem. This is why they're so unique. It's Christian McBride, you know, on his, I mean, you know, all the stuff that Christian does for jazz music, right? And so, and when you really, really think about that, so it's not just what he does on the stage, but it's what he does on his radio show. It's what he does through the museum. It's what he does in classrooms. Wynton Marsalis. It's what, and all, you know, so all these artists, I mean, and not even only them, those are just examples, but, you know, when you think about all the artists that go into classrooms, you know, and I remember Terrence Blanchard saying one time how he decided he wanted to be a trumpet player. So even him living in New Orleans with, you know, with his second line heaven, right? But someone came to his school and played, and he sat there and watched this guy play. And that's when he decided that he wanted to play the trumpet. So it's those little moments, that artist in a classroom, or that artist, you know, in a community center, you know, or wherever you find artists that are performing and sharing their gift. And for us, and for me, I can speak for myself, but it really is about where that artist is on the continuum and how are they continuing, you know, to continuing to move the culture forward. You know, and so I think I am constantly thinking about how are we moving the culture forward? So those moments, like you said, where people come, see a great show and da 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 da, but next week they may be onto something else, but they're not thinking about that great show. They're just thinking they just heard some great music. Right. But they're not thinking about everything that went into creating that. See, because when you start talking about culture building, it's about all of it. It's Russell Gunn creating an album based on reading a book that he and Helen from Les Nubians started talking about at the bar one night after an event with the National Black Arts Festival. You see what I'm saying? And so it's the building of that. And so then she said something because he got his DNA done from, you know, African ancestry during a Black Arts. You see what I'm saying? And so it's like and so all of that, while to your average person, that might be a really long story. But when we listen to the music, and then you go back through the story, all of those pieces were just about the exploration of Blackness. You know, Cyrus Chestnut told me this story one time about his grandmother making this chocolate cake. And Cyrus is just like, and she was stirring this cake, and he's like, you know, just stirring up a bowl, you know, an imaginary bowl. And he said, no one made chocolate cake like my grandmother did. And she's like, baby, I'm gonna make you this chocolate cake. And so then he turned around to the piano and played the blues progression that was created from that moment. That is our culture. You know, that's who we are. It's the braids that Sunny's wearing. It's the, you know, what Laura got in her background. It's the sway of our hips. It's the collard greens that we cook. All that is culture, you know, and it's all our culture. And all of that is found in our art. And so for me, it's the constant putting that on a stage or on a wall or wherever we put, you know, we're in a reading or however we, you know, kind of, you know, push and promote and elevate Black art and culture. And that's why I do this every day. Yeah, I know you ain't asking me all that, but yeah. Sorry.
No, but that's what it's all about,
I get passionate about it.
Amen. Amen to that, Leatrice.
Amen.
That's why we do it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a labor of love that we all do. I mean, I didn't get into the whole nonprofit part until I started working at WCLK. And then going, doing a thing called Jazz in the Classrooms and taking jazz musicians in and talking about, the radio side, but also learning from them the music side, because I'd sit on the sideline and just be awed by the amount of knowledge that they had about the music that I basically knew nothing about, as they were, instructing and brochure and, all the terms that, not being a musician, I had no idea about, As producers, do you see that there is a gender pay gap when you're booking artists, in terms of, do women get paid less or do they get paid equally to their male counterparts, since jazz is basically a patriarchal society at this point?
Ooh.
I'll let Laura or Sunny do that one first.
Go ahead, Laura.
I would say absolutely not. I'm sitting in, I'm sitting in the seat of, making the decisions of, financial decisions with these various projects. So it is definitely equitable, if you will. I also think, sometimes, at least where I sit often with, when I've been producing and programming at the Apollo or elsewhere, oftentimes it's who comes and pursues you, who comes to the table, who asks you, I want to do a project. And that actually, quite frankly, it's been diverse. Oftentimes, that's how things, sometimes that's for, at least in the way in which I've worked in a number of years, that's how it's worked. And that's when I am able to, as I have said, say yes. So whether it was working with Jerry Allen on a very large project that she did at the Apollo some years ago, was Women in Jazz, and she brought all of the women in jazz. And most often those are friendships and relationships that those artists have. And so I'm like, okay, tell me what you need, and I'm gonna say yes or no to the budget. But to really, again, I hope that I have been a vessel to realize those passion projects for certain artists. So whether it was a Jerry Allen, or we also did a project some years ago with the Kennedy Center, a tribute to Abby Lincoln. So, and that was, so again, just a variety of different artists involved. So I've not had that circumstance about pay and gender. Sunny, what about you?
I think in jazz, the really women have great agents, great managers, and so who were able to speak for them and negotiate for them. So we've really been able to, when it comes to pay, I find that there's great equity. Now, on the administrator side, we could have another conversation about that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because I think therein lies an issue. But we had a big Terry Lynn Carrington was our artist in residence, and we paid her the exact same amount as we paid the male artist in residence the previous year. We've had some, Diane Reeves came, and we paid her very well. We didn't negotiate that fee at all. I remember, when it came to us, we said yes. A lot of times with other musicians, we have to negotiate because we think that there might be, there has to be some room for negotiation because it's outside of our budget. But I think by and large for the women in the jazz world, we, when they come to the table, it's reasonable, it's a good fee for them, and we pay it.
And I agree. That has always been my, our practice as well. And, and I think that the one thing that you find in so many of these organizations, especially when you're sitting there talking to 3 Black women, and there's a lot of Black women that are sitting in the same type of position that we sit in a number of different organizations. And so we are very cognizant of, of pay and equity and what have you. And so we're to the point where it's not even really an issue.
We got a question from one of our listeners, Sherry Belgrave Rudder, who's asking, the schools continue to reduce and remove music and arts programs. What do you suggest to introduce and keep kids and young adults engaged, especially during these times? And I remember when, in the 70s, when the NEA, National Education Association, the Endowment for the Arts, suggested to Congress that if they wanted to save money in schools, take out arts and music out of the budgets. So it's always been a concern of mine. So what would you suggest would be a way to introduce and keep kids and young adults engaged?
Well, here in the DC area, it was an issue. I think in the last 10 years, we have really done a fantastic job of working with public schools and to make sure that music is in, most public schools. And really the arts organizations a lot of times are the content providers for that. I think in terms of what kids want to, digest, we recognize that you have to give them relevant learning experience.
That's
so for
right.
us, we really look at, jazz and hip hop is a good program that we have. That seems to work really well with middle school students. They are very engaged in that. They want to know more. We're able to keep them engaged, not only about hip hop music, but then as we toss in a lot of the jazz component of it, you get quite excited. And we do a survey, and by the end of the survey, 98% of the kids learn something, a few things about jazz that they had never learned. So we really, this idea of something relevant, a relevant learning experience, we take into every situation we go in.
Sunny, I think you said something really important, which is that you as an organization are partnering with the schools. And I think it is, I think if the schools could actually continue to embrace the different cultural organizations that exist in different communities that already are providing this kind of programs and services for young people, that would be, a very healthy way of continuing. For example, my granddaughter, in fact, last Friday, she decided to do a recital for me. She's learning guitar at the Harlem School of the Arts. They're doing a whole they're doing virtual lessons. And so, that's an organization that's been in Harlem for probably 50 something years and is still valuable and vital. And she's 11. And I think it also comes from the parents, quite frankly. It's what you become interested in, and when you, it's very difficult to convince young people to pick up an instrument these days, but to also become dedicated to it. And fortunately, my stepdaughter is insisting that her daughter, continue with the guitar. So I do think it's both, one, looking at the resources that exist within a community, and sometimes the schools don't have to actually do it themselves, but there are organizations that can provide services and actually get funded to do so. And then two, I think it comes from, parents also deciding what is, making choices about what they think hopefully would be helpful and important to the growth of their young person, and really also connecting to, again, some community organizations for lessons or information, et cetera. So that's how I would pose that answer.
And I agree with Laura. A lot of it is parents. My love for music came from my father, and my grandmother, like just the playing Ella Fitzgerald in the house. We knew all of Ella Fitzgerald. I know all of Mahalia Jackson. I mean, like all of my jazz knowledge came from my dad, and just going to jazz concerts, and, we were always going to a jazz concert somewhere. But I think that for parents who don't have that particular toolbox, that you can find toolboxes though online. You can find like, for example, check with Jazz at Lincoln Center. Winton and company have put together like some really, really great tools for children and for young people, which he's been doing for years. And so if you look at a lot of, just kind of take a look at, do a Google search for, jazz for young people, jazz for children, and you will find a plethora of resources that will help you teach your children, or give your kids something to, to watch online and to learn from. So there's a lot of tools online. So just do a Google search and you can find those things.
Got a couple of more questions. A festival producer is not necessarily a college major or a special degree program.
It is now, but go ahead.
Oh, I stand corrected then.
Yeah.
So outside of that, if I go to a university where that's not offered, would you recommend a certain educational track to follow in shaping a career as a producer?
Well, I do want to say that actually there are degrees now in producing and curating. There are degrees in all of those things now.
That's right.
That, yeah. So, and I don't necessarily know. I think that I can speak for myself, but, I was a government and public affairs major, but I minored in, like communications with a focus on theater. But also I love TV and radio. So I just kind of did all of it. I was almost a generalist.
So you're mass communications, basically.
No. I was a government and public affairs. That's what my major is in. My minor is in mass comm.
Right.
And sociology. So I was kind of all over the place because I'm always all over the place, but it's a perfect space for a producer. That it's, I was really more of a generalist as opposed to a specialist because I was interested in a lot of different things. I mean, I really, kind of have this natural curiosity, this intellectual curiosity. And so I did all of those things. And I just read an article a few days ago, actually, where it talked about how we have been a country that we focused on specialties. So, it's like I'm a heart doctor. Well, what kind of heart doctor are you? Well, I'm a thoracic surgeon. Well, what kind of and so do you deal with cancer? Do you do so we have been a country full of specialists, but the future the future is saying to us is that we need to be more generalists, and kind of broaden our scopes, a little bit more than Americans have done. So I'm just going to put that out there too. Who was that? Stanley? So
no,
Stanley.
That was actually Robbie.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Question.
So, so there is no, I don't necessarily think, other than going into one of the degree programs at some, because I know Emory has one of those programs, because I just spoke to one of their classes not too long ago. I've spoken to Georgia State has one of those programs. So if they're Georgia based, those programs do, they are at Emory for sure, and they exist also at Georgia State.
In DC, we have George Mason as a program, Virginia, George Washington University in DC, even American University has an events management program.
Yeah. And I just think on the ground, people kind of forget sometimes. My early years was as a stage manager and really understanding kind of how does a show come together? What are the real nuts and bolts? How do you work with artists? How do you work with your production team? And I think when you do something as basic as stage management, which is really such a critical person in putting programming together, it really is just, I found it to be incredibly helpful and something that I always fall back on. And then I do want to just echo what Leatrice said. I think having an interest in many different arenas, disciplines, for me as a producer has been extremely helpful, so that I really have I think, a decent, I can't say great, decent understanding of these different disciplines and how they can work separately, but how they can also come together. And so it's also, and that really is about also the more you see, the more you understand or know. And that as a producer, being able to see and hear as many artists helps you to become more discerning. And I think that's the other, I think, area that has to be developed. It's like developing your point of view and your, I don't want to say taste, but developing a particular point of view and really understanding, how the discipline can work. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And understanding your audience and, is a big thing too, that a lot of people don't take into effect, into consideration when they're producing. They look at it from, oh, this is who I want to see. and it may not be who their audience wants to see, and then they wonder why it was unsuccessful, or, and to piggyback off of you, Laura, understanding the cities that you're working in. I mean, I started in DC, which wasn't a union town, and then got to New York, and the whole stage management thing changed because everything's union. You have to go to the electrician to get something plugged in. You got to go to, you had to go to every little person.
Oh, it's a big awakening. Trust me,
when it was crazy.
When I came to the Apollo and realized that something that I might have done at the National Black Arts Festival was one type of budget, and then at the Apollo, I had to deal with 4-hour crew call, and then that's going to cost me. It exponentially different, and you really have to understand, that nuance.
Yeah, and I remember doing a show at the Garden. I'm standing on stage, and Ernie Isley hands me his guitar, and I'm like, no, because I know I'm not supposed to touch it. He's like, take this guitar, because the guy who was supposed to take the guitar wasn't standing where he was supposed to be. I had to get, with the head of the union, and he finally said, don't even worry about it, Carl, I got this, But it's that kind of stuff that people don't understand. It happens behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where it could have been disastrous, or it could be successful. So.
Now, Carl, can I interrupt you for 1 minute? Because I do have a question I have a question for these ladies. Okay. So, who have been some of your favorite artists to work with? I'm not saying who's your one favorite artist to work with, but who have been some of your favorite artists to work with? And I won't even ask who's been some artists that have been a nightmare. I won't ask that question.
And nor would we tell.
So I mentioned a couple of them already. Kenny Barron, the great Kenny Barron, is just a teddy bear. He's such an extraordinary gift to us all, and he comes with a sense of humility. And I just love to be in a room with him and to hear him tell stories. Wayne Shorter, early on, I've been with the Jazz Fest now for 11 years, but I remember Wayne Shorter sitting in a trailer with him and just spending the whole afternoon with them. And what that experience was like for me, it's one of the most golden memories that I can remember. Carrie Lynn Carrington is also an example. I mean, she's gotten so many accolades in the last couple of years. Now she's an MEA jazz master. But she teaches at the Berkeley Global Institute, and big life right now. But she's very grounded, and when she's having a conversation with you, she's having a conversation with you. So but I think you could probably say that about dozens and dozens of jazz artists.
Laura?
I am so sorry.
Laura.
We're in your living room. This is what happens.
I actually unplugged. I thought I unplugged it. I apologize.
No, it's fine.
So anyway, some of my favorite artists. Oh my goodness. Oh wow. So I'm going to start back, and I'm just going to say, in terms of jazz, I had to think about this, but I adored Max Roach, and he was someone that I worked with on a number of wonderful projects. And when I actually left one of my organizations, Aaron Davis Hall, he gave one of his drumsticks to one of my colleagues so that they can incorporate it into an art piece that they gave me, and he wrote on it. So
nice.
that was a highlight, working with him and being part of his inner circle. So that was wonderful. Let's see. Most recently, of course, Christian is just a lovely person and always wonderful to work with. The other person who we're not tight, but I absolutely love her. I love her is Liz Wright. I am probably, and she probably doesn't even realize how much of a fan I am, but I think she is just an amazing voice, and really appreciate.
And she's so easy to work with.
Yeah, she really is. She's like, okay, where do I stand? Okay, and she comes, and I mean, we did a project with her. We did a tribute to Ella Fitzgerald, and I saw Liz, and now I'm blanking on the song, but she came to the theater and she came down for the rehearsal, and I was working with someone who really was not that familiar with Liz, and I said, "Oh, she's gonna hit it out the park." Well, there was complete silence. She sang this song, and it was the most just so beautiful. You literally could hear a pin drop at the theater. And I really appreciate Liz Wright. I can go on and on, but those are certainly the folks that come to mind.
Yeah, and then Laura, you can't forget Craig.
That's true. Craig Harris.
Your boy.
Craig Harris.
Yes.
I saw his
literally,
project last year
Craig
with a jazz fest.
I have known Craig since early 80s.
Fantastic.
And have been probably one of his biggest fans as well. Having done there's so many projects that I worked on with Craig over the years, and just a constant. And he's like so always on the edge and edgy, but he's just the nicest person. He's just a good guy, and I so appreciate him and he loves Harlem, and just is always a person that says yes, and just comes out and does the job.
Yeah.
Kenny Garrett, I have to mention.
Mm.
Kenny Garrett was on our big stage last summer. Maybe it was the summer before, and he was extraordinary and stayed on the side the rest of the day and just talked to people, signed autographs. He was such an amazing guy. And Gregory Porter, also an extraordinary person.
Yeah.
I co-sign on those. I co-sign on everybody that you said. Especially, I did enjoy Gregory Porter. We worked with him, early on, and he came and tore Atlanta up, and they keep on bringing him back ever since. And someone else that was really extraordinary to work with is Omar Sosa. Omar Sosa, just such a powerful, like that. It's a small band, but it's so powerful and so polished. That's what, like, that kind of, when you work with artists like that, and that's that working around the world, and working everywhere, and just kind of, and constantly doing it. That's what you get, where you're like, I can't believe there's only 5 people on the stage, because it just sounds like you're in and you're outdoors, and sound like you're in a concert hall, with a whole ensemble. So Omar Sosa was just quite stunning to work with. And then, of course, I have my total favorites. Russell Gunn, always a favorite. Russell is probably my favorite collaborator. We've done some great shows together over the years where I'll come up with an idea and I'm like, Gunn, this is what I'm thinking. Or he'll come up with something and be like, Lee, let's do this. And so it's really, I always say that, when I die, they need to put in my, put somewhere in the program, my favorite collaborator was Russell Gunn. Yeah. So Russell is like a great collaborator, and Atlanta has so many amazing, musicians that I've had the opportunity to work with, but, really working with them, a lot of them through Russell and the bands and ensembles that he's put together. So that has really it's been great to work with so many amazing artists. And then Sonny, out of your shop, working with Federico Pena. There's I've had some great experience working out, with folks out of there. And then, of course, out of New York, that we've brought down for the festival over the years. So, but those are some of the favorite that I've worked with. Oh,
I'm sorry. I completely forgot Randy Weston. I'm sorry.
I went to his funeral.
Yeah, me too. Randy, oh my goodness. Randy.
Took my children to that.
He was talk about just a beautiful spirit and man, and just always so just lovely. I worked with him when I was in Brooklyn. Well, maybe it was in Aaron Davis Hall. Anyway, in Harlem. Anyway, going back a ways, and he was just a lovely person, but also such an educator. He would sit down with you and just tell you his history, tell you about when he had his club in, where was it? In Morocco, and he was just an extraordinary, obviously musician, but a person. You know, just lovely.
And then don't
man.
forget Hugh Masekela either. Since you brought up Randy Weston, you can't forget Hugh Masekela. He was always wonderful to work with as well.
A mess. He was a mess.
Absolutely.
When
He
I say
was.
a mess, it's like one of those, you know, like the uncle that comes
keep
to
you
the
laughing.
party, and he just, you know, he's gonna make you laugh, and you know, he
Mhm.
may play, but then he may not. You know,
And then you'll be like, so Hugh, if you can play, I got it. I know what to do. I know what to do. I know what you want me to do. So yeah, I love
You know,
him.
another wonderful, and we brought John Batiste to DC before he started on the Steve Colbert Show, and then we've brought him twice since then. And I had the chance to spend last year to spend the whole day with him, and I interviewed him as part of a Meet the Artist segment. He's also an incredibly generous person, and I love what he does at the end of the show, where he takes it into the street. You know, he takes his
that's right. Yep.
yeah, takes his keyboard, and he's doing a second line all the way around the block. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, Carl, I'll toss it back to you. I'm sorry. I just had to find
No,
out
no, that was
who's some of their favorite artists to work with. You know, jazz musicians were to work with. So back to
well.
you,
I
Carl.
have to say I have to agree with all three of you, but I have to add in Melba Liston.
Who'd you say?
Melba Liston.
Melba
Oh, okay.
Liston.
She
Was an incredible woman. I got to spend a few hours with her. And like, you know, Laura was saying with Randy, she was like giving me history, you know, sitting and talking with Dizzy Gillespie, another one, just crazy history, you know, Bobby Hutcherson, another one that, you know, just, you don't want him to leave.
That's right. Clark Terry.
Clark Terry's, yeah.
James Moody.
There's so many, you know. Okay, 5 questions, ladies, and then we're going to close this one out. What's your favorite dish to eat?
I can tell lobster. That's the New England in me.
Okay, I got you. Boston. Sonny?
I don't have a favorite. I love food. Whenever people ask me, I don't really have a favorite.
Lee?
I don't have a favorite either. Nope,
Okay.
I don't have a favorite. Nope, I do not have a favorite.
Favorite getaway or best getaway ever?
Dakar, Senegal, always my number one spot.
Jamaica, Negril.
Yeah, man.
I am Aruba now. Aruba is my place. My getaway now it's for vacation and chilling. I love though the place that I absolutely adore is I went to Vienne, France for the festival Jazz à Vienne, which is just it is special, beautiful festival in this Roman ruin and in this very small little, you know, French town. Beautiful.
Okay. What are you listening to these days?
Lakeisha Benjamin's Coltrane, Alice and John Coltrane project.
I actually have been listening to the Harlem artist. His name is Danny Mixon. And he's just old school Harlem. Just gonna, you know, play it. And I've just been hanging on to that CD. I'm one of these people, I have a ton of CDs, but then I only have a handful that I play. And his is one of them right now.
And I have to say, Omar Sosa, which is why he was at the top of my mind, because he has been on my mind a lot lately. And so my Alexa, I wake up like, hey, play Omar Sosa. Hey, play Omar Sosa.
Love him.
Yeah, and so and the cool thing about my Alexa is that it's been pulling music in that I had not heard. And so that is really very exciting. But I do, before you go to the next question, Carl, I have to tell you guys that I was in Africa under a clear sky. You know, the stars, it's like they were so clear you could reach out and touch them. I mean, you felt like they were that close to you. And if you can imagine this, a clear night, a slight breeze, and Omar Sosa's piano just wafting through the air. It was just
lovely,
magical. And so, but listening to my Alexa, it's just been pulling in all this music by Omar that I had not heard yet. And I'm just like, what album is that on? Look, she's sitting here talking to me now. She heard me say Omar Sosa, and she's like, I'm not sure about that. Say, Alexa, Erica, say her name.
When I play Richard Bona on some of the like Pandora's, Omar comes up too because I love
Now,
Richard Bona.
Sonny, that same night that I'm telling you about, Richard Bona had been on earlier in the evening.
Oh, girl.
He is a African rock star.
I've loved him. He was on my record years ago. I love me some Richard Bona.
Oh my God. Yes, he's amazing.
If you play Richard Bona music, you get the most electric music for that, creative playlist. And Omar obviously comes up.
Yeah.
What do you do to relax, to get away from your job?
Ooh.
Hike. I am a hiker, believe it or not.
Oh, Sonny, I'm so jealous right now.
I love hiking. I love the woods.
Laura Greer.
I would say right now, Netflix is like my best friend.
Okay.
Good thing in the quarantine.
Netflix is like my hobby and my habit.
And I will say that I don't know that I have figured out how to get away from what I do. Part of the I always say that the it's a blessing and a curse that what we do for a living is what other people do for entertainment. It's what they do to enjoy themselves. But that's what we do for a living. So you constantly kind of find yourself in this space of seeing a person, hearing someone and being like, I need them for my next event, or I need them for my next show, or, hey, what are you doing? And let me talk to you. And I do that a lot, even online, even in virtual space. I'll hear someone. I'm in this Clubhouse app now. And so I hear people speaking and I'm like, ooh, let me write them down. Let me follow them on. So I don't really know, but I did just get puppies. So I have 6-week-old puppies
Puppies?
Puppies, plural.
I did. I have 6-week-old puppies that have been with us for almost a week now. So they are certainly keeping me busy. And they're
definitely gonna make you walk.
Yes, they will make me walk. Although right now we're just kind of walking around the outside the house. But yeah, but they are cute and sweet and a great distraction, from this. So I'm looking forward to the downtime, that we are getting ready to go into.
Okay, so the 5th question's already been asked because Leatrice asked it for me, but we're going to go, I can't leave Stanley out. So he wants to know, how do I shop my music to producers?
Just send it on.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
With an understanding that we get an enormous amount of music because there's so many great creative makers out there. So.
And you only have so much time and so many opportunities to present this music.
Yeah.
I mean, I got the same thing when I was at the radio station. Tons of music, and you got to wade through it, and choose the best. And sometimes you choose the aspiring, but you can't play everybody. So Stanley, understand.
And then the other thing, well, you can't play everybody right now because that's the other thing. I think someone mentioned earlier. About like a few years later, but I was, really about that at the National Black Arts Festival. Like, I don't have any space for you right now, but, I like you. I like your music. Keep me on your mailing list. Let me come out and see you play and see you perform, so just kind of keep me in your mix. And then later on, and it may be 2 or 3 years later, that I have some space where you fit and where I can fit you. So Stanley, just send your stuff on and, see how people can, slot you in, but we just don't have a lot of space nor a lot of budget.
Ladies, I have to say,
Carl,
this has been an excellent conversation. And I thank you for joining me and taking time out of your busy schedules, because producing never stops, and people have to understand, no matter what goes on in the nation or the world, producers continue to keep that brain going and keep thinking of new ways and new opportunities for people and all that. So it's not like you shut down just because we're in the middle of a pandemic. We still have to continue. So I thank you for joining me. I also want to thank my producer, Robbie Wyndham, who always does an excellent job. And for our marketing and PR guru, Karen Hatchett, for being always and spreading the word around the globe. And for you three powerhouse ladies who have just given a wealth of information to the world tonight. I thank you for joining me. So continue to stay safe, ladies, and wear your masks as always, and social distance and all that other good stuff that will keep us all healthy. And have a happy holiday season.
You too, Carl.
You too, Carl. All
Nice
the best.
to meet you, Sonny.
Nice to meet you. You all post-pandemic. Let's break some bread, okay?
Yes.
All right.
Coming to your town.
Which town? Atlanta or New York?
Atlanta, New York.
All of it, right?
I'm coming.
Okay.
I'm a traveler, so I'm itching to travel. So
Well, come on through. Just let us know.
I will.
Yes.
Because right now
All right.
we're all in 4 different cities. So
Yes.
you know,
And we're all in our homes.
we're all in our homes. That's a good thing. Again,
Definitely. Thank you, Carl.
thank
Thank
you.
you, Carl. Thank you
Good
for
job,
having me.
Carl.
No, y'all did a great job, really. You know, actually, you answered almost all of my questions without me even asking them, because they all just kind of melded into each other. So I appreciate it. You know, and for the audience that was with us tonight, thank you for joining us and continue supporting us. And we will be back in the new year. We're not going to have a show for Christmas, because next Thursday lands on Christmas Eve. So enjoy your families, enjoy your holiday season, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll see you in January. Good night.
All right.
Good night.
Happy New Year.